We can never obtain peace in the outer world until we make peace with ourselves. One of the million brilliant quotes by the Dalai Lama. No doubt, seeing ourselves through our shortcomings can be a lifelong pursuit and one of the most challenging tasks to overcome. However, we are in a better position to improve ourselves when we come to a place of self acceptance. So let's discuss what impact can having a clear sense of self have on our personal and professional achievements. Today, we welcome Manhattan, New York soul pop singer songwriter Emily Thomas and guest entrepreneur, owner of Pilato Entertainment and Marketing Media here in Rochester, New York, Mr. Bruce Pilato. I'm Amanda Ashley, and this is episode 62, Self Acceptance. Welcome to Afternoon Cocktail.
Hello.
And introducing to you the beautiful Miss Emily Thomas. Emily, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being on our show. I'm obsessed with your music. I've been grooving all weekend. So what are you going to sing for us first?
I'm going to do my original song. It's called City. So
yay, I love
into
this
it.
one.
Thank you. Standing right here, captivated. No more fighting with my thoughts. I am where I should be in this beautiful city, and I'm free, yeah, so free, free from the girl I no longer want to be. And she takes me as I am. She's where I wanna be. Her name is New York City. Many faces passing by, yet easy to feel lonely. But when you look at buildings so high, you remember why you fell for her. And I'm free, yeah, so free, free from the girl I no longer want to be. And she takes me as I am. She's where I wanna be. Her name is New York City. Her chaos drives me mad, yet somehow keeps me sane. She's all I can see. Pretty New York City.
Yay! That song, I mean, I really feel like it totally captures the enchantment of New York City. I was
Thank
brought up in
you.
Long Island, so I would spend my favorite time of year, and I if you I know you spent some time out there, so I'm sure you agree, but there's nothing more magical than Manhattan in the wintertime.
Yeah,
Just around Christmas time with all the decorations, the tree, although this year it's probably going to not be any of that.
right.
Um,
For sure. Crazy.
so Emily, you're not actually from New York though.
I'm
You've lived
not.
a bunch of places. Where are
Yeah,
you right now?
I'm kind of from all over. I was in Colorado as a kid, Pittsburgh as a teen, and then I went to New York for college, spent 10 years there. So I actually lived in New York the longest. So I guess I identify most with New York and love New York. It's like in my heart. And then I moved out to LA a year and a half ago for music, and now I am back in Pittsburgh. So kind of all over, but it works.
You've gotten used to packing boxes, it seems.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, you said you're in Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. It's such a cool, cool little city for
It
sure.
is. It is. Yeah.
So, I mean, tell me, where did you go to, what was your schooling? And where did you go to school in
So
New York?
I went to Pace University for musical theater
Awesome.
in the city down by kind of Wall Street area.
So, did you pursue like dreams of Broadway as well, like aside from your
I
music?
I did initially. Yeah. I didn't know that I could sing until I was about 16, so I was kind of late bloomer and was kind of like a lost teen, didn't know what I wanted to do, and then I like found a family in this theater community in high school and decided to audition for all the top schools and somehow got into Pace, and it was a great ride, mostly for just like life experience. And I grew up pretty in a pretty conservative bubble, my family, and so it was nice to kind of have a little bit of freedom to learn to think for myself and be around like so much diversity and just learn a lot about life. So really, college for me was more of like life experience, and I did theater a little bit out of school. I did like a cruise tour, which was awesome, and some readings in the city, some workshops. I never made it to Broadway. I was really close. I was in the final three for a role for Kinky Boots at one point.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but
That's cool.
my heart kind of fell out of theater and into songwriting, and decided to take that kind of full on, and I've been doing that the last several years now. So
So, life before COVID, I mean, what
yeah,
was it like as a performer? Were you doing quite a bit of, private performances? I mean, your your music is very, I mean, highly high energy, highly produced.
yeah.
How do you go from writing the songs to getting your tracks to sound the way they are? Are you working with an exceptional team?
Yeah, I actually have really lucked out with people that I have met over the years. As far as like music producers, my main guy, Kerry Clayton, he's done a lot of the stuff that's out now. He did Sad Song and City and Taste of You. He was a guitar player for this rapper that I was singing backup vocals for, and I kept joking to the rapper, his name's Kwame Darko, that I was going to steal his guitar player and his band. And then I ended up hanging out with Kerry Clayton in Brooklyn, and then found out that he was also getting into producing, and we started doing tracks together, and we just really vibed and also became really good friends throughout the process. And so I got really lucky as far as really good quality production from him. He's an amazing musician. And then he kind of opened up the world of, like, oh, well, we have to send it to, my friend for mixing this. And, so it was great. And then I've worked with, a bunch of other producers. I find the collaborative process to be kind of the best part about music and meeting people. And that was actually the best advice that I ever received from a friend, Mark Pfeiffer, was to collaborate with as many people as possible. And so, yeah, I have about a 30 song catalog of unreleased stuff because I've been kind of holding on to that. I'm trying to go more so the songwriter route than artist right now. Um, so yeah, I'm all about working with everyone, anyone and everyone.
When when you say, I mean, there's nothing spoken for collaborations. I mean, like, yeah, there's nothing like it. It's like surrounding yourself, you know how they always say, surround yourself with the best people to make
Yeah,
yourself better. You know, I feel that way about collaborating with anybody. You know, like you get different viewpoints, and it just opens your eyes to music, and it opens your ears too in a different way. And I think everybody needs that.
yeah,
Um, but you were talking when you say you see yourself more as a songwriter than the artist. You mean like you want to kind of take a step back from putting your image out there so much and just
yeah.
focusing on songwriting?
Yeah, I would say right now I'm kind of at the 50-50. I'm still doing the artist life. But as I'm getting older, I mean, I love being in the studio so much. And I feel like it would be a beautiful thing to have, somebody who could take my music a bit further. It's really, really challenging being an independent artist. And I've taken a lot of pride in talking about, survival jobs and being a lot more realistic than most artists who try to just make it seem like they're only doing music. And for most independent artists, that's not the case. I mean, I worked for the last 6 years as a nanny to try to survive in two of the biggest cities in the States. And so I try to be really realistic with that. And yeah, I mean, it's been really tough as an independent artist because I definitely know my worth and my sound. But being heard by the bigger audiences, it's just really hard to do without a huge budget for PR and marketing. And as I hit 30, I was kind of like, man, I would really love to just kind of pass along this all these emotions and honesty that I have put into my music and start giving it to other people. And of course, continue life as an artist. I mean, I think one of my goals would be to like open for a bigger artist and just kind of be like a little more low key and stick to like the acoustic sort of vibes. But yeah, so that's where I'm at.
I think hitting 30 like does that to you though. Like
Yeah.
cuz like women feel like once they hit like a decade, or I mean everybody does, you know, like cuz you're like, "Oh, I'm starting fresh, like I'm in a new decade of my life." Like I felt this way when I hit 30. Like I was like, you know, you feel pressured to kind of reestablish your goals and to reestablish kind of like reestablish your dreams in a way. I don't think what I realize now, I'm 35 now, you know, like what I realize is that you don't necessarily, you could still pursue your dreams, but pursue different area, like other areas, you know, like when we talk to Bruce, I mean, what this man has done, like in his lifetime is unbelievable. I mean, he's a professional in the music industry and, you know, has worn so many hats. But I think what you realize as you get older is that you could just kind of you could as you journey through different facets of the music industry, um, and you learn different qualities about yourself, and you could still, you know, push your own music. There's nothing stopping you from writing and pursuing, you know, saying, hey, like this is me, this is what I wrote, you know, here's my image is me now, you know, without the, I guess, that social pressure from like big industry, but
Yeah.
still also be able to push your music to other people that might want to record it and pick it up.
Totally, totally. And I'm learning that like throughout life, dreams really change. And I feel like music is, as an artist, I love, being honest and wearing my heart on my sleeve and sharing my music with the world. But I honestly feel like um, music is just the beginning of everything. And I feel like it's so important in what I've learned in life to just give back to other communities. And so I have like really heavy on my heart the homeless community and the LGBTQ youth. um, if I could be somewhat successful in music, I feel like that's the first step. And then giving that back, whether that's teaching or even fostering as a parent. And then I'm just watching these like billionaire guys, Jeff Bezos with COVID, who's now worth, I don't know, something crazy like $90 billion. And if that were my money, I know they say that money changes people, and I'm sure I would change through that, but I would end world hunger. I would give like as much as I could back to the people. And so for me, music is in my heart, it's in my soul. And I know that without giving up, like there's no plan B for me, that at some point, I'll get where I want to be, but that's just honestly the beginning for me. And I feel like there's so much more that I could do with my life, on top of that.
Well, as today's theme is self acceptance. I think
Yes.
really accepting yourself comes with awareness, like awareness of who you are.
Yes.
As you grow older, you go through so many different stages of that, like where you think you know yourself, and then knowing yourself better, 5 years down the line. And I think, coming along with that is how you kind of shape your life and your values, like you begin to shape your values a little bit differently, and you tailor your life towards that, like the things that you're doing and the next steps you make forward. But yeah, I mean, there's so music, I mean, it's easy, like when you become a musician, like you see stardom, right? Everybody's blinded by stardom initially, but there really is so much. And all the giving that you're talking about, you can do through music, through
Mhm.
charities, like through starting what do you call it? Like throwing a benefit, like think of how
Yeah.
many times you could lend your voice to a benefit to raise awareness for homelessness.
For
There's
sure.
so many things that you could do it, and it puts you on a platform to do it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So going back to city, I mean,
Yes.
New York City, you had mentioned, was pretty much a testament to your awareness and growth. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
For sure. Growing up extremely conservative, like, with every aspect of me, I just was so ignorant to life outside of that bubble. And just thought that everything was the same and that everyone was this kind of picture perfect, happy sort of family, and that no one lied or cheated or did anything wrong in the world. And um I got to New York and I just felt this sense of freedom, and it was so diverse, and the people, as much as New York has a bad rep, like I love New York people. If you really actually like stop somebody and talk to them, New York people are amazing. And just being around like the theater community in college, and different backgrounds, and learning so much from my peers. Like my peers were just the best, and I learned so much from them. And I had so much to learn about myself, and how um, just I was able to think critically for myself. I never really understood that and what that meant. And I had a lot to learn, and that didn't even develop until kind of after college, actually. Um, I had a lot of things to accept about myself and find light with differences. And yeah, I came a long way. It was a very tough journey, and I mean, it's still something that I continue to develop as a person and grow into my 30s. And um, I'm just so thankful for my New York community to give me kind of the catalyst into learning to be my true self, to really be honest, and especially not live my life for anybody else, because I'm such a people pleaser, and I um, don't ever want anyone to feel disappointed in me. But it kind of just got to a point where I was like, you know what, screw this, like this is me. I swear I identify in the LGBTQ community, like I just yeah. And I couldn't have done that without New York and without my college peers, for sure.
I love it. Yeah, that's, I think living in a new place as an early, like a young adult will, and growing in that place will definitely make it. I feel that way about Rochester, believe it or not. I
Yeah.
always thought I would live in Manhattan, and never did. I came to Rochester straight out of college. And I mean, the growth I've done in the past 10 years, is just so tremendous, and it's taught me everything I know about myself. And I had to go through some hard times too, where you get slapped in the face with reality. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be who I am. And, it's still a forever long process. We'll keep
Always.
learning as we go,
Yep.
but that's, I guess, in a weird way, that's the beauty of it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, for
How
sure.
do how do you think, I mean, how has self-acceptance changed your music?
Well, at the very beginning of my songwriting, my very first music video, my very first song was very vanilla. It was like, I want to be a pop star, and it just wasn't me. And as I kind of got more into writing and honesty, um, I wrote my song "Taste of You," and I really felt like. The story was about my LGBTQ journey. And so I decided to have this music video release, which was really big and hard for me to do with my conservative background and family. And the video has, you think it's about this male love interest the whole time. And at the end, it reveals that it was actually the female the whole time that was kind of in the same shot. And it was, it was really difficult, but at the same time, it was the most love that I had ever received through music. I was placed on George Takei's platform, who's really big actor and advocate in the LGBTQ community. And yeah, I just had never had any sort of traction like that. And I was like, oh, I guess this is what happens when I'm honest. And, just going back to self acceptance, I started to really accept myself and let the world kind of see who I was as well. And it was a great feeling. So I just continued to write through honesty.
And I love that about your music. I think that really pulls through in a lot of your tracks. Like as I was like bumping it this Saturday morning,
Yeah.
it's like everybody in my house is always telling me to turn down the music. Even my kid, my 4-year-old. I'm like, please let mama just groove. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. Yeah, it definitely comes across, and I love, like, I resonate most with honest music, and it's not easy to do, but it's very liberating. So and in that process where you're liberating yourself and your thoughts, you're helping other people do the same. So it's the
100%.
power and beauty of music.
Yes.
Emily, where can we find out more about you, and when are you coming out our way?
I know. Well, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
I miss doing gigs at Rockwood Music Hall in the city for sure.
Oh,
That's
that's
kind
a
of my
great venue.
grounds. Yeah. But until that happens, you can find all of my music platform links on my website, which is emilythomasmusic.com. And also, I just wanted to share that I started teaching this year. So I'm teaching voice lessons. And so if there's
Amazing.
anybody out there listening that wants to learn how to sing or already knows how to sing and want, a little push further in musical theater or pop or whatever, I'm also available for that as well.
Incredible. Are you doing that virtually?
Yeah,
So like
virtually.
yeah,
It's been awesome. I have people kind of all over the coasts, which is great.
good for you. It's really fun. I
Yeah.
I love teaching.
Yeah.
Good for you, Emily. You're awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank
being on our
you.
show. And we're
Thank you
going to
so
hear
much for
one
having
more song from Emily towards the end. I would love to welcome Bruce Pilato to our platform. Bruce, how are you?
I'm great. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're awesome. You are blow my mind with all the stuff you've done and all the people you've met. It's
Most people say I'm a
incredible.
legend in my own mind, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
No, I think you're pretty much a local legend here for sure and beyond. So, Bruce, could you tell our audience a little bit about you and your background and who and what inspired your entrepreneurial pursuit in the music business?
Sure. First, I want to say hello to Emily. I didn't know anything about you. I just discovered who you are and thought you're very talented. So
She's great.
it's great to finally meet you.
Thank you.
Okay, my background is very interesting. Um, I was born and raised in the Rochester area in the town of Aranaquoit. And I came from a family of a lot of lawyers and judges, a very legal kind of community. My sister's an attorney. A lot of my cousins are attorneys, and my son became an attorney, became a district attorney, assistant DA. And of course, it would have been very easy for me to just, go to college, go to law school, go into my family's firm and make a lot of money. That's not what I wanted to do. I just became infatuated with music. Unfortunately, I'm a lot older than you guys, and I'm old enough to say I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan when I was 8 years old, and that was it.
I'm
um,
jealous.
yeah, it was just insane. It was like, and I always loved music. We had a neighbor who owned like a American Graffiti kind of diner, which was actually near Kodak downtown. And I had an older sister and an older brother, and he used to just bring boxes of 45 records home from the jukebox, and he used to give them to my sister. And of course, I absconded with all of them. And before I could read, I could tell you every record because I memorized the artwork on the labels. I'd say, "Oh, that's the Everly Brothers. Oh, that's Elvis." So I got into music very, very early. And after I saw the Beatles, I was just obsessed with it. And my parents made me take piano lessons. I wanted to be a drummer. So my dad, being an attorney, worked out a compromise where I took piano for 4 years, and he bought me, piece by piece, a drum set. Took me like 3 years to get the whole kit. But anyways, what happened is in 1965, I think it was. Yeah, I was like 9 years old. He said, "Oh, there's this rock band called the Rolling Stones coming to Rochester, and your sister wants to go see them. And, do you want to go to a concert?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course." So I went, and that was it. And I saw Peter and Gordon, who were a British Invasion pop group. And then the next year, he took me to see a group called the Yardbirds, which had a guitar player named Jimmy Page in it, who went on to form Led Zeppelin. And of course, I'm like, 10 years old, and I'm like, forget it. This Screaming Girls, I'm in, you know. So I became obsessed. And my father was the lawyer for the guy who ran the Ushers Union in Rochester. So he would just say, meet me backstage. I'll get you guys in. And they would just, I just started going to every show. And then my dad was the attorney for the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Washington. And our big arena was called the Blue Cross. It's now the Blue Cross Arena. It used to be called the Rochester War Memorial. So they wanted somebody who was tied to the veterans on the board of directors. So my father, knowing that he would never have to buy tickets for me for a show, said, "Oh, I'll do it." So he became a commissioner at the local arena, and he started taking me to every show. I'm like, middle school, high school. I met Jimi Hendrix. I met Led Zeppelin. I mean, you name it. I met every rock band that came through town because I just insisted that, he take me to every show. And then I went through high school, and at Arundequoit, we had our student radio station. We were the first high school in the United States to have its first FM station. And so I ran the radio station there. And then I went to Syracuse University at the Newhouse School of Communications. And I took recording and journalism and did all that. And we had amazing people at SU. I mean, Walter Cronkite, came and spoke at my news writing class, and Clive Davis spoke. They had a music industry curriculum back in the early 70s. It wasn't a major, but we had Frank Zappa lecture. We had, like I said, Clive Davis, Todd Rundgren, all kinds of amazing people.
Wow.
I ran the concert board with a guy named Rob Light, who went on to run CAA, the largest booking agency in the United States. And we had this thing called the Syracuse Mafia. There were about 6 of us. John Sykes went on to start a small company called MTV with 3 other people. Phil Quartararo went on to become the president of Warner Brothers Records. Another guy was the president of Chrysalis. So we all stayed in touch with each other. But after I got out of college, which was 1978, I came back to Rochester because I figured, okay, I love this journalism thing. I started doing music journalism. I was writing for the school paper at SU. And I said, you know what? I'll go to New York or LA and I'll work for Rolling Stone, or maybe I'll get a job at a record company, but I got to come home and earn some money. So I came home and I got a job at the local paper here, met a woman who became my wife. We're married 9.5 months, and she has a baby. So it's like, where am I going now? Okay. We ended up buying a house. I ended up living here. I'm working at this newspaper, but I was writing for all these magazines and music magazines and big national music mags. And one thing hit me like a ton of bricks is that none of the big tours would ever open in New York City. They'd always play Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany. Then they would play Madison Square Garden. So, we're in the 80s now. So Fleetwood Mac comes to town. I get them for like 2 days because they're here on a day off. Phil Collins would come through town, Hall and Oates, all these people, Peter Gabriel. And I'm getting the interviews before they get to the writers in New York. So I then pick up the phone and I sell my stories to bigger publications, eventually get into USA Today, I get into Variety, I get into Us Magazine, I get into all these great publications, and they start flying me around. Like I was in the studio with Fleetwood Mac when they were making an album. I got to go to London, I got to go to all these great places, and I did it all from Rochester. That's what was unique because my wife wouldn't leave. Our families were here. We had 3 kids by the time the 80s ended. And it was like, okay, this is it. I got to make it work from Rochester. I got to figure out a way to do it. And you got to remember the internet, didn't start until the end of the 80s. So
I was just gonna say that. I mean, pardon my interruption, but I mean, how, like right now, I mean, if you're in journalism, it's easy to write for multiple publications. I mean, I shouldn't say it's easy. I'm not a journalist, but like I would imagine it being a little bit easier than it was at that time with the internet, like you could kind of send back drafts and get, so on and so forth to different places. But how were you doing that in the past?
well, what would happen is, well, first of all, I have to tell you, I bought my first computer, which was a Macintosh in 1984, the second year Apple had the Mac. I bought one because
Wow.
I knew that was the future. My father made me take typing in high school, which I could never understand why he would make me do this. He said, no, you need to do this. You need to know how to type. So it's me and one other guy and a bunch of young, beautiful girls in my high school typing class, who all wanted to grow up to become secretaries. But when I got to college, I could type. So I could write a lot faster because I knew how to type. And what I would do is I did a lot of phone interviews, but I did these interviews as they came through town. And, I bought a fax machine very early on. That helped. But it wasn't until, once the internet started going, then it became very easy. Now nobody wants to live in New York and LA like they used to. I mean, kudos to Emily there who loves New York, but I wouldn't live in New York if you gave me all the tea in China. It's only because I love having a lot of land and a beautiful home, and I fly to New York all the time. I'm there all the time, but I go in, I do what I got to do, and I leave.
Come out.
And same with LA. It's okay. I can't stand in traffic jams. But anyways, yeah, it was hard. It was hard, but I did it. And the main thing is I got known as this guy that was very knowledgeable about music that was in upstate New York. And the publicist would call me up and say, oh, we've got, I don't know, whoever, the Kinks are coming through town and they're off on Tuesday and they're playing the show on Wednesday. Do you want to do the interview at the hotel on Tuesday? And I would, we'd close the bar that night. So, it would be really great. And when I did go to New York, it was really great. I got very involved in the Grammy organization and the Recording Academy. I joined in 1989. And what ended up happening is my life changed around the mid 80s when the compact disc came out, because they had to re-release a lot of records and they put out these things called CD box sets. And they needed somebody to write the booklet and help pick out the songs, because there'd be like 4 CDs in there with a booklet and all that. And I got hired to do all that because I had all these interviews and I had all this promotional material that I kept and filed. Anyways, I did 50 box sets and I produced a radio show called the King Biscuit Flour Hour, which was a live show. That was great. And that got me working with artists. And I became friendly with a lot of artists. And then eventually into the 90s and early 2000s, I got asked to get involved in management because they would say, you know more than my manager. Why don't you manage me? So I made a niche for myself as this guy from upstate New York that could do everything on the cheap. I would say to them, why do you keep your equipment in New York City? What do you pay for your storage unit? Oh, I got a great deal. It's only $3,000 a month. I said, $3,000 a month. Why don't you keep it up here? You can get a place for $150 a month. So I started doing that with a lot of artists, and I work with bands that I don't manage, like Yes and all these other classic rock bands. And I've hired crew from up here. I've done their storage up here. I've hired vehicles from up here for their tours, because it's so much cheaper than New York and LA, and they're not paying those kinds of rates. So, that's kind of how I ended up in management. So I guess that's a long version, but that's kind of how I did it.
It's amazing. So, I mean, I know that your book is on the way shortly, right? I mean, would you consider, of all the titles and of all the things you've, lived under and have done, would you consider writing your primary passion?
No, I love artist management. I love working with artists, and having had a musical background myself, I've done a lot of work in the studio. I've produced records. I've done a lot, 4 or 5 documentaries, all music related. Um, I just had to wear a lot of different hats, like you said in the beginning, because I didn't
Yeah.
live in New York and LA, and I had to figure out, okay, if none of these guys are touring, what am I going to do for 3 months? And I could say, all right, well, I'll work on this project, or I did a lot of work for record labels. I started teaching. I used to get asked to lecture a lot of classes, and the University of Rochester, who owns the Eastman School of Music, and Nazareth College are both based in this area, and they started asking me to come and teach music industry courses. So I only teach 1 day a week. I teach Tuesday morning at one school and Tuesday afternoon at the other. And they're like 2-hour classes. And because I tour too much now, because I'm on the road with these artists that I manage, and I manage about 5 or 6 artists now. But it's exciting. I would say, I'm very excited about my book. With this pandemic, there wasn't much I could do. There's no touring. There's not a lot of product coming out. So I said, okay, I got to write this book, because I had 1,100 cassettes with all my interviews, including 3 of the 4 Beatles, the Stones. I've done everybody from Barry Manilow to Marilyn Manson.
It's
I've done
crazy.
Drake. I've done Adele. And I'm still writing. I still write for a few publications, but that's the smallest part of what I do now. The book will be exciting. It's called Feedback, which is a double entendre, because feedback comes from a guitar when you put it in front of an
Uh-huh.
amplifier, and you got Jimi Hendrix and Pete Townsend and all those guys who I've known. And it's also people talking. Give me your feedback on this. So it's called Feedback: One Man's Journey Through the History of Rock and Roll, and it starts with my life going to that show in 1965 and meeting Jimmy Page when I was 10 years old, and finally to the point where I got to interview him, and then eventually work with one of the guys in Led Zeppelin. So it just kind of, it shows the different phases of my life.
That's great. That's so cool. I mean, who do you recall as being the most interesting, or maybe I'm sure there's a few people that you've interviewed that kind of give you an interesting experience, but who do you recall fondly, having had interviewed?
Well, I mean, the Beatle interviews were amazing. I did all of them except for Lennon, and multiple times. I only did George once, but I had like an hour alone with him in a room. And, I got invited to Abbey Road, and, I stood on the steps of Abbey Road Studios, and I just started crying. It was just like, oh my God, this is it. This is like Mecca. I've come to the promised land. And then they said, would you like to play the piano that was on all the Beatles songs? And it was like, are you kidding me?
What? That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah. And she goes,
Wow.
oh, you just missed Sir Paul. He was here yesterday. He played Lady Madonna for a bunch of people. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, I didn't want to wash my hands after that.
But
But
COVID, Bruce,
that was
COVID.
great. But actually, probably the best interviews I did were the ones I did with Little Richard. He was amazing. He was the architect of rock and roll before Elvis, before any of these guys. And it was a very interesting story, because he was gay. He was black. He was from the deep South. He used to tour. He was one of the first guys to have an integrated band. The white guys could go through the backstage entrance, but he and the other black musicians could only go through the kitchen of the venues. He was arrested a number of times for inciting a riot, because he got white kids and black kids to dance together, and those audiences were segregated.
Wow.
But he had great, and of course, the first gig the Beatles ever had outside of Liverpool was opening for Little Richard. So he had great Beatles stories. So yeah, but there's been a lot of great interviews. I mean, I can't pick. When you've done 1,100 of them, what's killing me is I go through this box of tapes, and I said, Aerosmith, I didn't know I interviewed her. Oh yeah, I guess I did. Okay, yeah. So you forget that you interviewed some of these people very early on in their careers.
It's crazy. I mean, did anybody ever surprise you, like where you have this, you see their persona and what they're projecting, their image wise, but then when you actually sit down with them, you're like, wow, I thought Little Richard would be like wild and crazy, but he was actually pretty shy. And I mean, I'm not saying that's the case, but was there anybody like that?
Yeah, Marilyn Manson. He's like the
Yeah,
most normal guy you've ever met in your life.
I've heard
He's
that a
like that's
lot.
all,
Yeah.
and of course Alice Cooper is a deacon in his church. I mean, he's like the most normal guy there is. I mean, he used to be wild. He used to be a raging alcoholic, but he's been sober for 35 years. Um, it's interesting. A lot of artists are very insecure, which you always, you see these guys on stage and they're just bigger than life. And then you sit down with them and it's like, well, do you really like that? Do you think, was my vocal good enough? It's like, you're the
Mm.
lead singer of Deep Purple. You're asking me if your vocal's good enough? Are you kidding me? So, those kinds of things always get you. And, when you finally become friends with them and all the like distancing is gone. And it's like, I don't have to be a hard ass journalist and you don't have to be a pompous, arrogant rock star. When you just get down to being people, that's a cool thing. That's a cool
Yeah.
thing, especially like, when you're sick. Or I had a shoulder replacement. I have a titanium shoulder because I hurt my shoulder and they had to give me a full shoulder replacement. And like I was getting all these beautiful get well cards from people who I used to have their posters on my wall when I was in high school. And it's like
Aw.
they just want to make sure I'm okay now. And it's like that's very nice. Most of them are very good. I tell people, the biggest rock stars in the world put their pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the insecurity part because I think like one of the things, I realize as a musician that is what gives confidence to a lot of people. We all have our insecurities, right? As just general human beings. And those insecurities, come in different forms over time. But yeah, you find the things that make you exude confidence and that's what kind of keeps you moving forward. What do you think that is for you? Like, is there anything in your life that makes you really like when you take that seat, it makes you feel more confident?
Well, I come from a family with a very, very high work ethic. And it's kind of like when you think you've made it, that's when you're just starting. Okay. Um, you know, the, there's there's always somebody who wants to do what I'm doing, and they will take my place in a heartbeat. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be paranoid or you have to be, aggressive against other people. I help a lot of people. I mentor a lot of people. But you know what? When somebody comes to me and say, "I've got this up and coming artist," would you give me some advice on them, or would you do a story about them, or whatever? You know, I would be at a point. Most people would say, "Well, no, I don't work with those kinds of people anymore. I'm working with major artists now." I'm not like that. I mean, when people send me music, I try to take the time to even listen to a little bit of the song and say, "It's good, but you got to work on your vocal or this or that." Um, it's funny. Here's a funny story. One of the interviews in my book was a guy that was good friends with Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan admired this guy named Woody Guthrie, who was an American folk hero, and he wrote a song called "This Land Is Your Land." And
Hmm.
he was also kind of a political rebel. He used to have on his guitar. He used to say, "This instrument kills fascists." But he was a folk singer, political folk singer, and he was dying of and he was dying, and he was Arlo Guthrie's father. He was dying in this hospital, and Bob Dylan just admired this guy, and he came all the way from Minneapolis, and he wanted to meet Woody Guthrie before he died. And he gets in the room with him for their first meeting, and Woody had heard his songs and everything. He said, "Yeah, you got some pretty good songs, Bob, but work on the voice. Work on your singing."
It's
And
probably
it's
good
like,
advice.
unbelievable. It's like it just shot him right down. Um, I'm good at what I do. I know I'm good at what I do, but I'm not so arrogant where I think my stuff is better than anybody else. I mean, I have lots of writers who I wish I could be as good as them. Um, it's got to be a community. And, what I heard from Emily is that she met a lot of people and she interacted with a lot of people. And you got to keep doing that because this is a business of relationships, and it's
Yeah.
a business of networking. And when you least expect it, the thing that you don't think is going to go anywhere is going to catch somebody's eye, and they're going to say, "Oh, can I do that?" Or, the other thing is too is I will still do stuff that is quote unquote beneath my job description, just because I want to be able to say I worked with that person. Of course, the highlight for me came in 2001 when Ringo Starr's manager called me up and said, Ringo does this thing called Ringo Starr and his All-Star Band, and he changes all the musicians every tour. And you manage Greg Lake of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. We're thinking maybe, he would be good for the band. So I negotiated for Greg to do the tour. And then they said, who else do you know? And I said, well, I know a lot of people. I don't manage a lot of people, but I know a lot of people. And I ended up being hired by Ringo to help put the band together. And I went out on the tour. And I'll tell you what, when you get to work with a Beatle, forget it. I mean, everything was police escort, private jets, everything. And you say to yourself, wow, I've really made it. Well, you know what? That was 2001. That's 20 years ago. I was really just at the beginning of the career I have now. And I started with the Beatles. So there you go. But it took a while for me to actually get artists, that rely on me now and trust me in the way that, the big managers have. So, yeah.
Is there, if you could have your pick, you could work with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be?
Well, if I could go in what they call the Wayback Time machine, I would give my, well, I'm not going to say it here, but I would give a certain part of my anatomy to be Joni Mitchell's manager.
Yeah.
Because Joni Mitchell, to me, is the greatest songwriter outside of the Beatles ever.
She's pretty fantastic.
And I got to interview her and I got to meet her. And it was her birthday this weekend. And I posted a picture of me and her. And everybody said, oh, so cool and everything. She was incredibly insecure all her life. And how she wrote those songs was just beyond me. But she had good company, hanging out with CSNY and, hanging out with James Taylor. I mean, she had a lot of heavy duty boyfriends. But, she is just the greatest. I mean, what a lyricist. Just amazing. The Beatles will always be the greatest pop song entity. I don't know individually if any one of them is, but as a group, you couldn't touch them, and you still can't touch them. And, when you can go from songs like Yesterday and, Day Tripper all the way to crazy stuff like Helter Skelter and I Am the Walrus. I mean, what a body of work. Just spectacular. So it's great. I mean, I've been able to just kind of stick my fingers in a lot of pies. I mean, I haven't put my whole hand in. I'm not that big, but I was close enough to all these people where I got to just get inspired enough by each of them to, to do what I've done.
Beyond business, I mean, how do you believe all these various experiences have shaped you personally and especially as a family man? You have 3 boys.
Yeah, I've been married for 40 years, but I like to tell people my wife's been married to me for 40 years because that's been the
along
struggle.
For the ride. Yeah.
No, I mean we've had a good run, but she had certain things. She put her foot down. She said, "I'm not leaving Rochester." Like, okay, So she goes, "You can do whatever you want, hang out with all your rock stars, but you got to live here." And it was like 35 years ago, that was next to impossible, but I made it work. It's been, we have 3 sons. They're all young adults now. They're all married. 2 of them have kids. One of them has a kid on the way. They've all done very well. My middle son became an attorney and a district attorney, and now he's just gone out on his own. And he's going to be doing entertainment law, copyrights and trademarks, all that. He's an amazing bass player. He studied with a guy named Victor Wooten, who's in Bela Fleck.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about him is, he came to me for a lot of advice as far as being a lawyer in the music industry. And I've been able to throw him a few things, but I told him, I said, look, if you're going to be in one field that you're going to focus on, I would make it immigration law. And he said, immigration law? I said, yeah. because if you live outside of the United States and you want to come here to work, you have to get a work permit. You have to be cleared through Homeland Security and all that stuff. You have to go to the American Embassy in London and be interviewed. And one of my artists who are based in London, a three-piece band, we paid $7,000 for them to get their work permits, and they were good for 3 years. Well, they got them in 2018. That means they're going to be up in 2021. No one's going to even tour until 2021 from foreign countries. Okay. So what's going to happen is when the touring opens up again, there's going to be a deluge of artists. They're going to need to get their O1s, which is another phrase for a work permit. So I said, that would be because you can, he wanted to live here too. I mean, he's got a beautiful home in Fairport. He said, look, I can do this from anywhere. I can do copyrights from anywhere. I can do trademark work from anywhere. And he's licensed for New York, and he'll also be able to be licensed for Illinois and Tennessee. So he can do stuff in Nashville. And then I said, you just hire another law firm in Los Angeles. If you have a client out there, you do all the work, and then they represent them in court because you didn't take the California bar. So, it's interesting. I'm very grateful to my family because having the lawyers and the business people in my family, I got to learn that end of it. And that's just as important as being somebody who knows how to do the creative stuff and the PR stuff and all that. If you don't know the law and you don't know the business end of it, you'll never make it in this business. And many artists today are very, very business savvy, which is why they're not getting screwed like they used to in the 60s, where they give up their publishing and they give up, everything that they should own. By the way, Emily, never sell your publishing. Never sell your publishing. Okay? I'm going to have to go up there and stick my finger in your face and tell you that.
I own all my own stuff.
Right. But you know what you can do, though? You can lease your publishing. I have artists that have leased out their publishing for a number of years. And there's two reasons for doing that. Because if you're signed I have artists that signed to BMG, right? If you're signed to a label like a BMG or Columbia or something like that, you can say, look, we'll let you lease you the publishing for the period I'm on the label, because they're going to work harder for you if they've got the publishing, and you can still keep the writer's portion of it. What they do is they make your shit famous. Okay. They make the stuff like, those are hit songs. Then it comes back to you. Now you've got something that's worth a lot of money. So there's a lot of ways to look at things.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, so at which point in your career do you recall yourself ever feeling pretty vulnerable or like just challenged? What was the most challenging thing you feel like you've accomplished?
I tell this story to a lot of people. So I get out of college, I get married, I'm working for a newspaper, and developing all my music stuff because the freelance music writing had nothing. I mean, it didn't affect what I was doing at the paper, so I could do it. And I had like 2 kids at that point. It was like the early 80s. And I'm watching the Grammy Awards. Okay. And I'm seeing all these guys I went to college, sitting next to Prince, sitting next to this guy, sitting next to that woman. It's like, here I am in Rochester, New York, writing for a few music magazines. And these guys that I used to hang out with every night, are getting up there. One of the guys I went to college with married Shana Easton. Remember her, the pop singer, Sheena Easton? And,
Sounds very familiar.
she won a bunch of Grammys that year. Anyways, it really depressed me. And it's like, oh, God, I blew it. I should have just gone to New York or LA like all these guys did. Well, gradually things started turning around. And like I said, the CD thing with the box sets, that really put me in with all the labels. And it was fine. And when I did see those guys, it was like, hey, Bruce, how you doing? Everything. And it's like a lot of them helped me and kind of open arms. And what's interesting now is they all want what I have. They're moving to Montana. They're moving to like, oh yeah, I left LA. I'm not, who needs to live in LA anymore? Oh, I live in Arkansas now. I love Arkansas. I got a lot of land. I own a tractor. It's like, oh, great. You own a tractor. Fine. What happened to your Mercedes? Oh, I sold it. So it's kind of like, we laugh about it, but the one thing I did is my wife and I had our kids really early. We had all our kids by the time we were in our 20s, out of our 20s. So our kids were out of college when I was like 50, right? Which, I said, okay, I got 15, 20 still good years left. And I'm doing a lot of stuff that I probably should have done when I first got out of college, but I wouldn't have had the wife and the kids and the house and the land and all the stuff that I have because I was able to do things so much more cost effectively here. And,
Yeah,
everybody says, well, how do you deal with the winters? You know how I deal with it? I
you
book
deal with
tours
it.
in South America. I book tours in Florida.
There you
I
go.
just like,
Smart man.
that's it. We just
Get
go,
yourself
we
out of
got to
this
get out of
tundra.
Rochester for the winter. That's all.
Yeah, that's the way to do it for sure. Rochester, I think there's a lot of beauty to staying here and for all the reasons, you just said. But do you ever like for those people that you said had lived that alternative lifestyle and now they're, taking on the life that you've lived, do you feel like
Listen,
you missed out?
I got to tell you this great story. Okay. I've had tons of rock stars come to my house, stay at my house, eat at my house. Because when they come through town, if they have a night off or something, I'll say, oh, why don't you come over here? My wife's Italian. She'll make, great food and we'll talk about your box set. Right. So I've had the guys from Starship were here and I've had one of the Rolling Stones here. I've had Les Paul, the guy who invented the electric guitar,
What?
stayed at my house
Wow.
when he was like in his 80s. I've had all these groups that I work with, ELP in Asia, and they've all come here, and they're all blown away by the whole area. Of course, I try to have them come here when it's not 6 feet of snow, but other than that, they can't. And I tell them what I built my house for and what I pay and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, what? I said, yeah. It's like, dude, I just go to New York when I need to be there. I just go to LA when I need to be there. I rent a car and I do what I got to do and I fly back. So yeah, a lot of these guys are just getting away from all that. I mean, Peter Frampton lives in Cincinnati now. Eric Clapton lives in Ohio.
Yeah.
They married women from those areas and they have their homes in London and they might have an apartment in New York, but they don't want to raise their kids there. But I have to tell you a funny story. I'll make this real quick because I know we don't have a lot of time. But so I was doing a project with the guys in Starship when they were really, they were massive. We built this city on rock and roll and Sarah and all these huge songs, right? So the guitar player was staying at my house, and I had a neighbor like 3 doors up the street who was a Starship fanatic, right? He had no idea I was working with these guys. And he go, oh, yeah, I've seen them like 8 times. I love Starship, blah, 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 blah. So I went to the guitar player. I said, look, you got to do me a favor. I said, I want you to go to that house up the street. See it three doors down. I want you to ring the doorbell with your guitar around your neck. And here, take this cup with you and tell them that Lori's making a pie and she needs a cup of sugar. And that I sent, that she sent you down there. And could she please borrow a cup of sugar? So he goes down the street. He rings the guy's doorbell. And him and his wife come to the doorbell. It's the guitar player from Starship. He goes, hi, I'm staying with the Pilatos up the street, and Lori needs a cup of sugar. I just want to know if we could. The guy completely lost it. And of course, I'm in the background with my camcorder recording
That's
this thing.
awesome.
Yeah, so, life's short. You got to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce, I can't thank you enough for your time and for sharing your stories. I think you're incredible what you've accomplished and I wish you continued success along your journey and I can't wait to see what
Well, I'm going to be
you have
wearing
in store
another hat.
next.
I'm going to be wearing one more hat. I'm going to be a producer of a Hollywood film that's being
What?
made right now. Yeah. Very interesting story. I'll make it as quick as I can. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who I've been involved with since the early 90s, had an album in the 70s called Brain Salad Surgery. And they had all those songs like Welcome Back, My Friends, to the Show That Never Ends and Still You Turn Me On and From the Beginning. Anyways, that album was a concept album about how computers would take over society and tell people who to vote for, what to do. I'm very timely with what's going on in today's
Yeah,
world.
I'd say.
So I get this call out of the blue from this guy in California. It says, you work with ELP? I said, yeah. He said, I'm interested in licensing, Carnival 9. It's spelled Karn Evil 9. It's takeoff on the word carnival. And the whole idea was in the future, there will be no government. We will just be run by large, big tech corporations. That's how the world will be run. And he goes, we want to make a movie about this album that they came out with. I saw ELP when I was in high school in the 70s in Madison Square Garden. and I saw this big computer they had on the screen that said, I will control you, I will be you, and all this kind of stuff. And we want to make a movie about how that actually happens in society. I said, okay. I said, so he goes, who owns it? I said, we own it. The band owns all their music, their publishing, everything. So I got the sole surviving member is Carl Palmer. I got him on the phone with the other manager in England. And I said, look, I think this is real. And the guy says, you might have heard of our company. We're called Radar Pictures. We've done the Jumanji films that you've seen, that series. They did the Riddick films. They did the Revenge of the Nerds. They did Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts. They did The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. Just a Mr. Holland's Opus, which won the Academy Award that year. So anyways, I went back to him and I, put on my business hat and I said, if you want to make this happen, we own all the rights. We'll let you make this film, but you got to make the three of us producers. And they agreed to it. So we're now in meetings with them, and we've been looking at script ideas. And right now it's between Netflix and Paramount. They're fighting over it. So it'll be one of those two companies will make it. And we were going to start filming this year, but it'll be next year.
Oh, wow. So yeah, it'll take some time before it comes out, it seems. But
Yeah.
that's super exciting. I can't wait. Well, definitely keep us posted. And can you share with our audience where they can find out more about you and, about what you have up and coming?
If you go to my website, which is just pilato.com, Pilato.com, there's a contact us thing in there. You can drop me an email and I will see it. I'm not one of these people that doesn't look at his emails. I'm also the only Bruce Pilato in the United States. I had it checked out. Yeah, there's a site called How Many of Me Are There? Have you been to this website?
No.
And you put your name in there and it'll tell you how many, Emily Thompsons there are, or how many, whatever. So I found out that I'm the only Bruce Pilato in the United States. So if you go to Facebook, you'll find me.
It's funny. When I was on a plane to Puerto Rico one time, and my last name's Rodriguez. Ashley's my middle name. But I go, Amanda Rodriguez, and they pull up like a whole list. It's like a Mark Smith or like a Brian, So like, all right, I guess I know I'm not the only one is my point.
I'm sure there's a few Emilys out there, right? That's a pretty common name.
Just a few.
Yes. There's so many of me.
So funny. Well, Bruce, thank you again. Let's bring back Emily. Emily, could you close us out with one of your jams?
Yeah, for sure. I just also wanted to say thanks, Amanda, for having me. And Bruce, it was super cool hearing all of your stories. And I look forward to your book, Feedback. I love the name of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great name.
Yeah, but I'll close this one out with my song, Sad Song. A tiny background behind this. I don't get to talk about it a lot, so I'll just share. I had been dating a guy at this point, and we had it was, on and off for like a year, and he was being deployed, and I told him I would wait for him, and he had told me not to. So anyways, 2 weeks into his deployment, he was texting me through WhatsApp and said he missed me. I ran into him at Grand Central.
Oh
and
my gosh.
not that he was not deployed. He had a girlfriend, and that was
What?
his way of ending things. So he kind of balanced us and was trying to figure out which one.
Oh my gosh.
And that was his way of
What a jerk. Yeah.
I know, right? So I tend to Taylor Swift people and write about them. So this song is about that situation. It's called Sad Song. You always let me walk away. Too fast to notice tears rolling down my face. You always get me with those words. Shame that none are true. Just like the idea of you. I don't ever want to feel that much. I get lost and fall into that place usually do. My poison is you. It's supposed to be a sad song, but instead it's just a big fuck you. I should have expressed when I had the chance to say what I wanted to. It's supposed to be a sad song, but instead it's just a big fuck you. The things I suppressed and now I've regressed to something I thought was through. I'd hoped you'd show up at my door. You'd finally want me, and I'd feel worthy. But that dream won't never live again. You always wreck my head for days. I can't forget. I don't ever want to feel that much. Yeah, I get lost and fall into that place. I don't ever want to feel at fault. I usually do. My poison is you. It's supposed to be a sad song, but instead it's just a big fuck you. I should have expressed when I had the chance to say what I wanted to. It's supposed to be a sad song, but instead it's just a big fuck you. The things I suppressed and now I've regressed to something I thought was through. You always let me walk away. I don't understand your intentions. When you let me walk away, you said I was damn close to perfect. You always let me walk away. How could you let me walk away? Oh, it's supposed to be a sad song, but instead it's just a big fuck you. I should have expressed when I had the chance to say what I wanted to. It's supposed to be a sad song, but instead it's just a big fuck you. The things I suppressed and now I've regressed to something I thought was through. Fuck you, fuck you.
Yes, he totally deserved that. My goodness. Well, Emily, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your music with us today. Make sure you all back home go and check out Emily on Spotify. She's also on Apple Music, and I'm sure on all other channels as well. Emily, you want to tell them your website as well?
Yeah, it's emilythomasmusic.com.
Keep doing it, girl. You sound amazing, and it's a pleasure to have interviewed you.
Yeah, it's been great chatting with you. You're super fun and easy to talk to. So
thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, we got all our viewpoints today from today's wonderful guests about self-acceptance, and I want to give you mine. So the pathway to which we gain a better understanding of who we are, why we interact with others, all begins with self-acceptance. For better and for worse, acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses, what makes us tick, what makes us fear, why we feel the way we do about ourselves, in contrast to those around us, can be daunting and really overwhelming to face head on. However, when we air our grievances with ourselves and embrace our vulnerability, life truly begins to unfold in unimaginable ways that you never imagined possible. A good portion of my life, I struggled with feeling accepted. From my school days as a young girl trying to make friends, to trying to gain the attention of the first boy I liked, to my college years as a sorority girl and an artist, to moving to a new city and beginning the next stage of my life, to the struggle of embracing adulthood as an immature, free spirited 23-year-old. I realize now looking back that for many years, my personal validation was entrusted in the groups of friends I molded myself to fit in with, in the jobs I tirelessly worked, and in doing the things that deemed right or appropriate for the time period I was living in. I was living for everyone else simply because I didn't know any better. I'd act silly in effort to be funny. I'd drink myself unconscious because I thought that was cool to do. I'd sometimes talk and dress a certain way. I'd succumb to the social pressures of living in a way that the people around me would find me as being funny, cool, or acceptable enough to become one with the ones I was seeking approval from. My entire sense of self had gone rogue. It took me a failed marriage, a lot of travel, writing, reflection to come to terms with my vulnerability and to regain that power to see my life forward in an entirely new way. With the weight of a dead relationship shed, I chose to shed the weight of other relationships that hadn't positively served me. I began acknowledging my shortcomings and began to work towards strengthening them. I began tackling my insecurities, restoring what I could control, and making improvements wherever possible. Even with a newfound self-awareness, insecurities still burden. However, having the ability to acknowledge what they are have made them far less crippling. Practice positive thinking. Adopt positive self-talk instead of negative self-talk. Repeat positive affirmations. Learn to accept what cannot be changed. And strive to let go of the past and dwelling on painful memories. It is just as important to have compassion for yourself as it is to have for others. Forgive yourself for your past you. Embrace the lesson and awareness all previous experiences have brought. And see yourself forward to a burden-free life because there's so much life to gain on the other side. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Afternoon Cocktail is now available on all podcasting platforms. So if you're a listener and you don't have time for the videos, go download your positivity and keep spreading good energy. Thank you all, and we'll see you back here Wednesday. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Later.